now, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Elijah Cummings, says he will likely seek their testimonies, too.
All you have to do is follow the transcript. If there were names that were mentioned or records that were mentioned during the hearing, we want to take a look at all of that. We'll go through, we'll figure out who we want to talk to, and we'll bring them in.
If any names came up multiple times in that hearing,
they have a good chance of hearing from us.
And a source with direct knowledge tells NBC News today that Alan Weisselberg, the chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, will be called to testify before the House Intelligence Committee. There are lots of different pieces here, legal, political, different investigations. Let me try to break these down into a few different pieces and draw upon our experts here. Glenn Kirshner, let me start with you. On the question that we've been talking about for the last couple of years, this issue of collusion, which is sort of the heart of the mandate that Robert Mueller, the special counsel, has. What we heard from Michael Cohen yesterday was he said he was suspicious, but he had no evidence of collusion. He also had that item in there where he said he'd never visited Prague. That seemed to cut into a little bit of this so-called dossier story that's been out there. In terms of collusion, in terms of Mueller's mandate there, where does that stand after what we heard from Cohen yesterday?
Yes, Steve, I thought that was an interesting piece of testimony from Michael Cohen when he said, listen, I didn't see any direct evidence of collusion. And I'll tell you, as a career prosecutor, that actually gives me a comfort level with a witness when it would be easy for him to throw some lies into the mix and say, well, of course I saw evidence of collusion. The fact that he didn't overstate, he didn't gratuitously try to dirty up Trump, I think can give us a certain level of confidence with respect to the credibility of the balance of his testimony. But, you know, sometimes witnesses don't know the import of evidence that they actually do have to offer. For example, when he said that he overheard a phone conversation between Trump and Roger Stone talking about future WikiLeaks drops, I can tell you as a prosecutor, when I'm looking to see whether Trump and the campaign coordinated with Russia, with WikiLeaks, with Stone about the release of those stolen and damaging emails, I would assess that as evidence of collusion or conspiracy, not rock solid evidence on its own, not evidence that standing alone proves anything beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think he actually may have said he didn't see any direct evidence of collusion, but he sure saw some circumstantial evidence of collusion.
Okay, now, Paul Butler, on this issue of suborning perjury, the idea of encouraging others to commit perjury, the accusation there made in this hearing from Cohen yesterday, she says Trump did not directly tell him to lie in his testimony before Congress last year about that Moscow deal, but that Trump communicated to him in a language, essentially a code, that Michael Cohen, as a decade-long employee of Trump, understood. That line between, okay, he didn't directly say it, but I inferred it from this way he speaks. Legally, where does that land?
So, Steve, experienced criminals, and it's starting to sound like Donald Trump might be in that group, don't talk about their crimes explicitly. They talk in code in the way that Roger Stone suggested. That Michael Cohen suggested. Michael Cohen also suggested that Trump's lawyers changed his testimony. If that's true, then those lawyers would not be protected by attorney-client privilege. There's a crime fraud exception. A gutsy prosecutor could well haul Trump's lawyers into the grand jury. There'd be a legal fight about attorney-client privilege. But if they prevailed, they could be asked, why did you change Michael Cohen's truthful testimony? If they say it's because the president, our client, directed us to, then the president is guilty of a suborning perjury. He's guilty of a not just federal crime, but an impeachable offense.
And Shannon Pettypiece, we saw the president's public reaction to this yesterday. In terms of what is your sense of the folks around Trump, the folks inside the White House? Is there a sense of what they consider the most significant aspect of yesterday's testimony? Is there a particular aspect of it that they are worried about going forward?
Well, I would say inside the White House, among a lot of the aides and staffers, they're sort of so battle tested at this point that not really takes a lot to sort of get on their radar. I think a lot of people just felt like this was another circus day in Washington, and there'll be another crisis tomorrow they'll all move on to. But among the president's advisors who are sort of more well-versed in the legal aspects of this, the growing concern is about the Southern District of New York investigation. And Michael Cohen gave us a little glimpse into one of the threads that SDNY might have pulled on when he mentioned these inflated financial statements that were used to try and get a loan from the Buffalo Bills. Now, it seems like Michael Cohen only has a piece of this puzzle, but it's one of those strands that prosecutors could pull on and unravel, and congressional investigators could as well. And I think that's why we now hear them talking about bringing in Allen Weisselberg, who, by my count, his name was brought up 24 times yesterday, so it would not be a stretch of the imagination to see him brought in. And there's not that much that he or the Trump organization would be able to do to prevent a congressional subpoena because they're private citizens. They have no executive privilege like a lot of the other people in this administration. So, yeah, we could see them coming in, and the SDNY threat, I think, is still out there, and that is something that remains to be a concern among those close to the president.
And Congressman, I say, too, there's legal questions, there's political questions. There are political questions as well. One of them revolves around what we said, the most direct and clear piece of evidence that was produced yesterday at this hearing from Cohen was that check, which gets to the issue of the hush money payment, which gets to the question of a campaign finance violation, the question of a felony there. The political question that's raised by that, if you have the chairman of the Oversight Committee there saying, hey, I believe this is a crime, the political question that's raised is, do you as a member of Congress believe that rises to the level of a high crime which would be an impeachable offense? And I know yesterday, if I understood you correctly, I think on our airwaves, you said that particular piece of it, even if you establish a campaign finance crime there, you're not sure that that rises to the high crime level.
And Steve, that's right. And I would be interested in what Mr. Butler and Kirshner think as well. As a prosecutor, I think there's an indictment waiting for Donald Trump when he leaves office on that issue as a co-conspirator for a false statement regarding campaign contributions or for the illegal campaign contribution. But what I'm looking at are bigger issues here. What's at stake for our national security with Russia? What's at stake as to whether this president is financially compromised? And so these payments, to me, I would look at them as prior bad acts. They inform me as how this shadowy operator of an individual in Donald Trump operates. And if he's acting that way in paying off women, he's probably doing the same with his taxes and the way he deals with the Russians and his overseas investments and cashing in on access to the Oval Office. And just thinking about what the American people care about and wanting to know what's at stake for them, if their national security is at risk, if the rule of law in our country is at risk, I think we will have bipartisan buy-in and the American people with us if that's where we're going. So I'm saying if that's all we have, I don't know if that's worth pursuing for impeachment.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.